Okay, good morning everyone. A very warm welcome to the 2019 AISTS Client Team Project Presentations. I'm Michael Broadley, Head of Education at the Academy, and over the next 2 days we're going to see 9 presentations by our participants in the Masters of Advanced Studies in Sports Administration and Technology. Over the last 7 months, they've been working on in-depth research for a client in the world of sport. They'll have 20 minutes to present their findings and then field 15 minutes of, maximum 15 minutes of Q&A from the panel sitting in front of me here, who I'll quickly introduce. From left to right, we have Dr. Lauren Riviere of Riviere Consulting and also Scientific Advisor to the AISTS. Welcome. Dr. Claude Stricker, the AISTS Executive Director. Welcome. Professor Bjorn Valleser from the University of Lorraine in France and also head of the marketing module at the AISTS. Dr. Juan Carlos Landrove of Landrove Law and also head of the law module at the AISTS. Professor Emmanuel Bale from the University of Lausanne's Institute for Sports Science, ISUL. And last but not least, Dr. Giovanni Derchi, Professor at the École Hôtelière de Lausanne and Scientific Advisor to the AISTS. So welcome. I hope that the pencils are sharp and you're sufficiently caffeinated for the day ahead. So this morning we kick off with the World Dance Sport Federation, where the team has looked at developing a new strategy, a new pathway for the communications department to be revamped within the federation. And I'm delighted this morning to welcome 2 of the most important staff members. We have Christina Swan, who's the project officer, and Guillaume Felly, who's the general manager. So thank you very much for being with us this morning. So we're very much looking forward to your presentation, and I hand you the floor. Thank you.
Good morning everyone, and welcome to the first project presentation of this year. As Michael said, we have been asked by the World Dance Sport Federation to develop a contemporary structure and strategy for the communications department. But before we start, I would like to quickly introduce our team. We have the dance sport expert Lavinia from Germany. We have also 2 communication experts, Maria and Didier, and myself. My name is Jan, and I'm the project manager of this team. The World Dance Sport Federation is the world governing body for dance sport and has its headquarters here at the Maison du Sport. It began all with the classic ballroom and has become nowadays a competitive sport with a high number of disciplines. Just to mention some of them, we have the classic ones, Standard and Latin, containing dance styles such as rumba, salsa, bachata, paso doble. But also new styles are currently upcoming, such as breaking. We have also street dance and hip hop. I think it's worth to mention breaking. They have been for the first time at the Youth Olympic Games last year in Buenos Aires, and they are also in the program for Paris 2024. Also an important aspect has been the communications department director left the federation recently after 10 years in the federation. So this development, together with the fact that the way how sports is consumed nowadays is changing the way a communications department in international federation is structured and how they are communicating to their audiences. Therefore, the World Dance Sport Federation has mandated us to come up with a strategy on how they could move towards a modern communications department while being an umbrella federation for all dance disciplines. Good. How have we tackled actually our business case? First of all, the first objective has been to map all existing communication channels. It has the objective was to have a current picture of the current situation of the federation. We have done that through desk research by our own. We interviewed a lot of people in the federation and we also use the Google Analytics that the Federation provided us. Once we had the current picture, we went then to the second objective, which was to design an ideal model for a communications department, for a modern communications department. And this has been mainly done through a benchmarking exercise with 4 other international federations, as well as a survey with the 92 national member bodies. And at the final, the objective 3, and this is very important, objective 3 has, the objective has been to do the bridge between objective 1 and 2. So we have the current picture, we have also what other federations are doing, and now an ideal model, and now we had to come up with recommendations on how the federation could move towards this ideal model of objective 3. Good. So now if we, maybe just one quick thing with regards to the scope. It's very important we acknowledge that they have a lot of different audiences, also because they have a lot of different dance stats. However, the objective of this project, the scope, has been to come up with an overall strategy for the Federation and the Communications Department. It could be a potential follow-up project with the Federation to come up with specific action plans on the different audiences they have. Secondly, it's also important to mention that the recommendations have been done on a qualitative, from a qualitative perspective. So numerical budgets have not been in scope for the project, but we are happy to discuss them at the end of our presentation. We have a backup slide on that. Good. Now coming to the current state assessment, what the Federation has currently. So we have the website. Of course, they have the official website of the Federation. They have also an individual website for breaking. This was, they set up this website because of the Youth Olympic Games last year. They're using the usual social media channels such as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. They're also having a lot of editorial content. So we would have press releases for the media professionals. We have blog, news, magazines for the fans and the athletes. And then we have bulletins for the dance sport community, to informing, for example, new regulations of the Federation. And then we also have the audio-visual content, which is actually all the video-related content that the Federation is managing. It's worth to mention FlowDance. They have a 1-year contract with FlowDance, which is the external OTT platform of the Federation to live stream the main competitions. Good. Now that we have the current picture, it's also important to mention what were the challenges within this first phase. Which challenges is the Federation currently facing? First of all, from an organizational perspective, roles and responsibilities within the organization, within the communications department, were not clearly allocated. Second, we have the website. The website is currently not addressing sufficiently the general public and is also focusing mainly on the dance disciplines Standard and Latin. The upcoming new dance disciplines are underrepresented in the website. For the social media channels, we identified a high number of unofficial social media channels which are actually not managed by the Federation, and these unofficial channels are actually using the branding of the Federation in a wrong manner, which could be a problem for the Federation. For the editorial content, we identified a general drop when we speak with regards to viewership in 2018 compared to 2017. Especially blogs, bulletins, and press releases had a significant decrease in viewership. And then lastly, for the audiovisual part, we identified, or after the year of contract with FlowDance, there was a low number of subscribers recorded. They were not actually matching the expectations that the Federation had at the beginning of the contract. That being said, we have the landscape, we have the challenges, and let's see now what other federations are doing in their communications department.
Yeah, well, we interviewed 4 different international federations. We had interviews with IWF, World Athletics, FINA, ISO, and FIS. We've been choosing them under the common criteria that they had to be an umbrella federation for different kind of disciplines, and at least one of their disciplines had to be in the Olympic program. So we interviewed them regarding their workflow, regarding their strategy, and regarding their organizational components. It's common that every federation has a communications manager on top of their communications department, which is when divided in clearly functions and in clearly separated task for the staff. Some of them collaborate with externals. So, for example, for tasks which require specific skills or which are very time-consuming, they work with freelancers or with agencies. Regarding their overall strategy, they all try to enforce the view as an umbrella federation for different disciplines, and therefore they have to talk to very various audiences with different needs and different ways to engage. Their written content, they handle mainly the same. They have 3 different audiences: fans, media, and the sports community. For all of them together, they have a dedicated news section with all the prominent news regarding the current upcoming competitions or regarding interviews. And it's very important to mention that none of them has blogs or magazines. For the sports community, they deliver also bulletins or newsletters, especially dedicated to them to inform them about rules or current changes. The website is for all the international federations a main communication channel built up with a landing page format. And on the page you can see the different disciplines with mini sites, and some of them developed also icons or specific colors to facilitate the identification of those disciplines. Very prominent also is the social media. The latest posts are visible in hubs or in social media walls to enforce a bi-directional flow between those 2 channels. So going on with the social media itself, it has a very high priority for all these international federations, but the strategy between them is not homogeneous. So some of them, for example, have different channels divided by the sports disciplines themselves or divided by competitions, and some of them have just one social media channel for all the disciplines. They regard also the Asian market as a market with huge potential and invest therefore in Weibo and WeChat. The audiovisual is the most diverse part of the communication in those federations. Most of the video content is not handled by the communications department itself, but the communication to the stakeholders like the broadcasting or the media, or also media rights, are handled mostly by the communications department manager. YouTube is a huge priority too, so they show, for example, highlight clips or interviews, stories about the athletes or behind the scenes content on YouTube to their audiences. Important also to mention that FINA is the only one or the only federation with an OTT platform called FINA TV as one of the biggest federations. So we've seen now the current state or the state of the federation, and we've seen what all the other federations are doing, and on that base we proposed an ideal model for the WDSF. You can see that the communications director, the communications manager, is on the top and defines the strategy for the communications department, which should then be aligned with mission and vision of the whole federation itself. And a very huge point of it is the integration of all the different dance disciplines symbolized by those icons. And now that you've seen what's actually been going on in the federation, how we did the benchmarking and the ideal model with which we came up, I want to hand over to Maria, who will explain you the recommendations we have and for the WDSF.
Thank you, Lavi. Well, now moving on to the 3rd phase of the project, which was developing the recommendations for the Federation. We came up with a roadmap that includes all the categories that you have already seen throughout the presentation, which are organization, website, audiovisual, social media, editorial, and a final one that's digital projects that I will then get into more detail in the future. We basically came up with 21 different recommendations, but for the purpose of this presentation, we will only present to you the 10 most important ones, the 10 that we found to be critical. To begin with the organization part, the first recommendation that we have is for them to have a clear organizational structure and a clear definition of roles and responsibilities. This means having potentially a communications director and assigning roles to the people that they already have, following the ideal model that we have just presented. We believe this is very important, and it would be considered to be a high priority recommendation for them to continue. Another very important recommendation would be to have consistent branding across all channels. As you have already, my teammates have mentioned already, there were some problems with the social media where the branding is not necessarily consistent, and in the federation itself, the use of the logo, the colors, the typography, and every element of the brand is not particularly consistent across all the channels. So we think this is very important. World Dance being a small federation looking into being more recognized, this is something that they should really consider doing. Moving on to the website. The main recommendation that we have is to redesign completely the website that they have, which is something they already are in process of doing. But a few pointers that we suggest is to have a landing page format to make it more visually attractive, especially because dance sport is a very beautiful, very visual sport, so we think this should be given priority. Something else is to have every discipline in the homepage, but at the same time, have pages for each of the different disciplines. This way, they will really be perceived as an umbrella federation that has several disciplines underneath. We suggest even to go further and create branding or icons or even specific colors that identify each of the disciplines in order to identify them from one another, but at the same time have the idea of it being a global umbrella federation. Another sub-recommendation that we have is to definitely have social media, a social media hub or social media wall in the homepage, so that a synergy can be created between the social media channels and the website and favor the communication both ways. And finally, we suggest to have special visibility for competition, events and rankings, because based on the survey that we did with the national member bodies, we know this is very important for them. Moving on to the audiovisual portion of our recommendations, what we suggest is to switch back to Dance Sport Total, which is the platform they used to have before for streaming of main events and competitions, and also use Facebook Live, Instagram TV, and in general social media channels to stream all other competitions. The reason being that they used to have Flow Dance, which is a paid OTT platform that unfortunately has not had the acceptance that they expected it would have. We suggest that switching back to this Dance Sport Total, it works as a micropayment, so the user can essentially log in and pay to see just one single competition, which would be the ones that already have a big audience because they're the most important ones, and the rest, moving the rest to social media makes sense because then they can have a much bigger audience and potentially reach much more people that are not necessarily related to the sport, but that can potentially find it attractive. Moving on to the social media portion, we suggest to have only one social media profile per channel. The reason being that we think there's not yet a lot of content that can be created, and as long as all the disciplines are well represented in the social media, they can have a single social media channel, and eventually as the federation grows, they can potentially expand and have different channels. Another thing that we suggest is for them to use social media for live follow-ups. This is very closely connected to what I will present now in the editorial part. Basically, we suggest for them to eliminate the blog and the magazines. We know these are two tools that they use a lot and that are very beautiful and very well done and have very good content, but essentially the viewership is going down, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of resources from the federation to use this channel. So we suggest basically switching everything back to social media, and this is how it connects to the previous recommendation that we have. Basically everything that is under the blogs and the magazines right now can be moved on to social media. And the second recommendation for editorial would be to develop a platform for professional media services. This way, the professionals from the media can have access to images, to videos, to logos, to press releases, even to perhaps an accreditation system. And this basically facilitates the spreading of information and facilitates the fact that these professionals can actually get the name of the brand out there and use it more often if the content is readily accessible for them. And lastly, we have added this category that's called digital projects. So looking into the future, what we suggest is for them to have a World Dance Federation app, which is something that several international federations are doing. It could include competition results, athlete profiles, rankings, and could essentially function as a second screen for the spectator that can be either in the competition or looking at the competition on TV. They can have much more insights into what the athletes are doing, have more information, and this is something that's really on trend that can potentially, again, help them have a good view into the future. These are other recommendations that we have. As you can see, they have very clear actions that can be taken. And with the Federation moving on to participate in the Olympics in Paris 2024, they have a huge growth potential, and we believe that success depends on having great communication. Thank you very much.